Well, good afternoon, good morning to everybody. My name's Rob Hope, and I'm going to host today's webinar, which will be for just under an hour. It's hosted by the Water Services Maintenance Trust Fund, and we are going to be discussing how corporate funding can incentivize delivery of drinking water services in rural Africa. If people can mute their mics, that would be very much appreciated. Thank you. Okay, so the structure of today, I'm going to say a few words of welcome and provide a little bit of context to why we're having this webinar, and it's going to look at three objectives in particular. Firstly, just to say a couple of words on the rationale, the impacts and the implications of the Water Services Maintenance Trust Fund, to then discuss opportunities and the role of corporate or private sector to provide results-based funding. And finally, to promote some awareness, certainly in the Kenyan context, of these types of approaches to explore how they may be adapted or taken up at a greater scale in the future. So it's going to be very much a Kenya focus. We realize these are global themes, global challenges, but the focus of today's discussion which will be very much on the Kenya context. So why do we have a Water Service Maintenance Trust Fund? So the name is very deliberate in terms that we see significant challenges on the operational sustainability of rural water infrastructure. And this is common across much of Africa and rural Asia as well. And the figure before you, which was provided by Tim Foster, shows the reduction in functionality for both pipe schemes and hand pumps over a period of time. And it speaks to the disconnect between capital expenditure investments on infrastructure and then their operational sustainability, and then the implications that has for services. And this, is illustrated in the Kenyan context in the census in 2019, where 23% of households reported their main water supply was surface water, which is certainly not what the constitutional commitment is trying to achieve in the country. So part of this process is a sort of a simple conceptualization of what the trust fund is trying to look to do, or results-based funding in particular. And if you look at the lower left-hand side, you can sort of see this, the idea that user tariffs provide services to some, but in a very unreliable way. So the argument is there's some form of subsidy is required in the rural water sector. And I think most people, not everybody, but most people would recognize that for most rural water systems, there is some subsidy required to keep those water services flowing. And you can see this contextually in the urban sector, where the World Bank estimates is about $300 million in subsidy goes into urban water services every year. So it's very difficult to make an argument that rural water services can exist without a subsidy. So what we've been exploring through the work of the Trust Fund is this idea of, can results-based funding provide some form of catalytic intervention to improve the service delivery and to bring government into funding these services as well. So this is the conceptualization of what we're trying to do. And the way in which the Trust Fund works is very much in this dimension between a professional maintenance service provider contracted with rural communities, also with schools, and potentially in the future with healthcare facilities, to guarantee a reliable service delivery metric. The work that we've done in Kenya is very much focused on reliability. We clearly recognize water quality as a key concern, but there is not a clear modality for doing that in the short term, but there is wider work going on in many places to try and include that in the future. But in this context is, can you ensure and guarantee that rural water infrastructure works throughout the year? Will users pay a proportion, a share of the cost to that? And through that, then the Water Service Maintenance Trust Fund provides results-based funding to address the subsidy gap that the service provider faces. And then up here in the top row, you can sort of see we have results-based funders and governments. And the idea is that they would provide funding into this service to take this forward and make it a more sustainable model for the future. Our focus today will be looking at some of the work of results-based funders that we'll be joining in the second panel. And I think the future work, the criteria is to try and understand the conditions in which government can support this in the future also. So for those not familiar with the Kenyan context, we've been working in 2 of the 47 counties. So I think if I scroll over Kitui County here, which is in the arid and semi-arid lands area, so this is an area, as in much of the Horn of Africa, that faces significant climate threats at the moment, with multiple rainfalls failing to appear. So it's under a lot of stress at this time, and also in the southern county of Kwale on the south coast. So some of the impact reports that we've presented in this report, which is on the website kituiwaterfund.org, I'm not going to run through all of that. That's not necessarily the purpose of today, but there's a recent report where we've charted over the last 5 years the work of the Trust Fund in terms of what we think we've been able to achieve with our partnership through Fundifix. So you can read some of those before you. Obviously here you can see that most repairs are fixed within 3 days. So it's a very high level of service performance. You can see the number of rural water users, the volume of water being produced, and the number of repairs. A lot of those details are in the report, and I'm not going to dwell on all of that today. One of the things that I would point out, which I think is important for the work as we set it up, is you have seen this very good improvement in reliability of the service provided, both to community hand pumps, but also to smaller and large pipe systems in rural areas. So the professional service provider can fix most of the systems within 2 days. Whereas you look at community management, which on average takes a month or more to fix these systems. And as we're all aware, during drier periods or public health crises, I mean, these services are extremely important, and finding ways of being able to deliver them more effectively is extremely important. And then the final slide before I turn to the first panel looks at the role of results-based funding coming into this. So the initial work was incubated by the UK Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office, FCDO, what was formerly DFID. So they provided some of the initial funds to allow us to get started. And then across the figures here from 2017 to 2021, you can see that the fund has grown. It's not a huge fund, it's quite small, but it's grown, and the percentage that's come in from results-based funders has increased quite significantly over time, which is something we see as a positive thing. Okay, I'm going to pause here and talk to the first panel that we have. So this, I will be joined by the trustees of the Water Service Maintenance Trust Fund, Professor Albert Muma, Ms. Joy Basola, and Engineer Mike Thomas, and also by the Director of Fundifix, Cliff Inyaga. So if you're able to turn on your mics and your videos, I will take this down and we can start a short discussion here. Okay, great. Nancy, if you're able to pin people, that would be helpful. Thank you. Okay, right. So if I may start, I would like to invite Professor Muma, who's the chair of the Water Service Maintenance Trust Fund, to say a couple of introductory remarks and maybe reflect on the relevance and the scalability of the Trust Fund to other counties in Kenya. Professor Muma? Right, Mike, I'm going to shift gears. I'm going to put you up. Well, I think Albert's obviously has a question with some of his. Maybe I can invite you to talk about professional service providers and the extent to which we think they may be missing in the Kenyan context, why why we may see a challenge there potentially. If you'd like to say a few words on that.
Thanks, Rob. I think you've given some good background here really around the difference between professional services and maybe the community managed systems, and really around the performance and reliability. I'm going to speak a little bit in terms of from my own experience, where we have operated a scheme in the past, about for 10 years or so. And so really looking at, what are the impediments for professional services to come into the market. And I think one of the issues, broadly speaking, is there's a legacy. We have lots of community managed schemes, and there's an inertia to change. And really, if we want to talk about change, then we need alternative and scalable models. And that's a lot of what this discussion is about, in terms of what those models look like and really what is the performance that they deliver. Then we could be interested in really what is the incentive to change, and you've touched on this already, really around the actual performance. If we're focused on infrastructure, then we're not really thinking about why we would need professional services. Whereas if we're very much focused around the actual performance on service delivery, and we could be thinking a lot about this concept of uptime, really what is the reliability of a system, then there's an incentive to really drive more professional services. From the side of a professional service provider, there are some risks that we do need to talk about, engaging with different communities, especially communities that are in the underserved areas. Maybe they are vulnerable. They don't have, they're not really able to afford the professional services, and that sort of reliability matrix indicator that we really want to look at. And so there's a financial risk to any professional service provider, and this is one of the areas where the trust fund is really coming in to try and move the risk away from the community to the and move it away from the professional service provider, and that risk is picked up by the trust fund. The other one around this is also the issue of scale. Many pipe systems, for example, might require a multiplicity of different skills. And if you don't have scale, then it becomes quite expensive. And again, this makes it unaffordable for the community managed schemes in the underserved area. So here really, again, the trust fund is providing, by shifting the financial risk, enables professional service providers to come in and develop scale without having to carry that risk themselves. The other area, I think, is from the side of the county governments that might be concerned that professional service providers might be exploitative. And this really means that there needs to be regulation and oversight from the county governments, oversight from the communities themselves. They still have a very important role in making sure that services are delivered, high quality services are delivered. So I think essentially, overall, if we move to a situation where we focus on the actual performance of systems, then we may see more professional service providers picking up that demand. There has to be a good operating environment for professional services. So as I said, the trust fund is coming in to help undermine the risk, the financial risk that the professional service providers might be faced. And again, that makes for a better environment to see these professional service providers coming into this space. Those would be my immediate comments. Thanks.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks, Mike. I don't know, Professor Muma, can you hear us? Are you?
Yes, I can hear you, Rob. Yes.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. So I wanted to invite you as the chair of the Trust Fund, maybe to say a couple of words and reflections on the Trust Fund, maybe in some areas of the relevance and the scalability, but if you'd like to make a couple of comments in those areas, that would be most welcome.
No, thank you, Rob. So I think that what I would like to do is just to comment on three aspects of this, which is that one, the framework that has operated for many years now for delivery of water services, particularly in rural areas, has been one that is very much based on self-help models and interventions that have come in to support community groups have really not focused on sustainability of delivery of services. They've laid down systems and then left it to community groups, to try and operate these systems with the result that I think, the place is littered with many water projects that really have not survived beyond a few years. Largely, it demonstrates, I think, that one needs to move in the direction of both of, professionalizing delivery of water services, but also in the direction of trying to find avenues for involving the private sector in delivering these services. I think we are conscious of the fact that it's still very difficult to find, a rural and community water system that will be commercially viable without some support. And in the model that the water laws of Kenya provide, this support towards the financial viability of community water systems should be coming from county governments. So far, county governments haven't yet stepped up to the plate. There are a number of areas in which there are significant policy developments that are required in order to enable county governments assume this mandate. But I think what the Trust Fund is trying to do through this kind of pilot systems is to demonstrate how it can be done. And I think if through these systems, one can see that essentially with a bit of financial support, many of these systems can be rehabilitated. They can actually meet the objectives for which they were initially established. And I think county governments can have a model that they can pick up and implement. And so when we look at questions of upscaling, we really think that bringing county governments into the picture would be a very important plank of this development. But at the same time, we see a lot of room for other philanthropic organizations that are willing to underwrite some of these costs to see that in this model there is a practical option that they can definitely support. And so we hope that beyond this there will be lessons learned that can be adopted and scaled up so that there is a practical option available for community water systems, because at the moment many of them struggle, and then it's easy to assume that the answer is to eliminate them, but we think that actually they can succeed very well if there is some mechanism such as this one that can bridge that gap, sometimes only for a short period of time, but certainly that can bridge that gap to enable them professionalize service delivery. Yeah, thank you very much, Rob.
Okay, thank you, Professor Muna. So if I may, I'd like to invite Joy Basola, who's one of the trustees as well, to discuss the bridging the gap and the role and the barriers for corporate or private sector engagement, whether you, Joy, have some reflections in terms of the work of the Trust Fund and your wider experience in this area.
Thanks. Thanks, Rob. And I think Rob and my other trustees have really put it very well in terms of what the Trust Fund is trying to achieve and really what is creative about this Trust Fund. One is pulling resources from different sources and putting it together to support rural water service delivery. But the main, most important that I find, innovative and creative about this model is the focus on reliability and sustainability of the services. And a lot of private sector companies, private sector corporates, philanthropists really usually look for models that are sustainable, models that they can, be sure that they're guaranteed that they're putting in their investment and that investment is going to deliver on the services that they're promised. And so this model whereby it's first of all results-based, and that is very key for a lot of the corporates, again, that you want to put your investment where you're sure you're going to get the results. This is one model that assures you of the results that you're looking for in terms of the funding that you're putting in. So for example, I think one of the indicators that Rob talked about, and maybe Cliff will touch more upon, is the reliability of the service, but the uptime. I think one of the indicators that we measure is, how for that particular pipe system or for that particular hand pump, how much was the downtime, or on the flip side, how available was the service throughout the entire period. And this is the responsibility that the professionalized maintenance service provider guarantees, at the moment of signing the funding with us. So I'd like to encourage any other private sector actors that are out there looking for a model, looking for a partnership that first of all is reaching out to the marginalized rural areas, especially within Kenya, and wanting to provide water services to them. This is one fund that you could, partner with us, work together with the maintenance service providers and reach out to these communities to ensure that they have the service provided to them all year through. And two, that it's reliable. And three is that the results that you will be looking for are easy to measure, because like Rob said at the beginning, that we are using professionalized maintenance service providers, and they have some of the best tools in terms of measuring some of the metrics that we're looking up to. The other part that is important to a lot of the private sector actors, and just from the experience of my work, is that you would like to see areas where the government has a role to play. And this is the same thing that we're saying here, that first of all, this is a service that is mandated to the county governments, but we also want to make sure that they are a part of the regulatory and oversight provision for this model. And as we continue speaking to more counties and wanting to bring them on board, I think they play a very key role whereby the government is playing its part. And is also there to ensure sustainability of these models, that in case, one of the partners is to pull out, we still have the counties taking it forward and embedding it within their investment plans, embedding it within their budget structures, so that in future they can pick up from this model and take it forward. So the other part that I wanted to mention really is the strength of the partnerships that this fund is bringing on board. So one, you have the private sector side, you have the county governments, but you also have the communities playing a very key role. We've talked about the subsidy part, but this is also, these are a small tariff that the communities may be required to pay at some point, and this is their own contribution to making sure that also these services are up and running. And for a lot of private sector actors, again, this kind of little contribution that is coming from the communities is very important. And so this model also ensures that the communities are part of the solution. So I'd like to invite any other partners out there who are looking to invest in similar systems, either through your CSR funds or looking for result-based financing partnerships. This is one where I would like to scale up, going into new counties and to be able to reach the rural communities. We plan to have a bigger event later, early next year, where we really can interact with the counties, face to face, or a hybrid event. And this will give you an opportunity to really be able to listen to them and also be able to, start forging the partnerships if you would like. So please look out for a similar event here in Nairobi, where we'll bring some of the counties where we're already working in, and also others who may be interested, so that we can take this forward. Thanks, Rob.
Good. Many thanks. That's extremely helpful. Maybe now if we turn to Cliff Inyaga, who's the director of FundiFix. There've been a couple of questions thrown up there that you might like to reflect on as well, Cliff. I mean, Mike's mentioned, some of the concerns from the community level about bringing in a professional service delivery provider. And it may be useful for you to reflect on those issues, but also to think of, you know, your sense from doing this work for many years now. What advantages do you see from as an operator in terms of providing these services in rural communities and schools? Thank you.
Thanks for that, Rob. Yeah, so Cliff Nyaga here from Fundifix. We are a social enterprise working in Kenya. We work in 2 counties of Kenya, Kitui and Kwale County. And our service is structured around providing a professionalized maintenance service to rural communities as well as schools and institutions, healthcare facilities that manage some of these rural water points. We take an insurance approach, and that is to say that we aim for area-wide services. That's very important in terms of economies of scale. Mike, I think, mentioned that. That allows us to maintain multiple water points within a given region, while essentially being able to cross-subsidize between different types of technologies or different types of performing water points. We currently maintain hand pumps and small pipe systems. As you're familiar in the rural areas, we still have a lot of hand pumps, so we do not leave these out. Then we also have the small pipe system. So in both Kitui and Kwale, it's the borehole systems. And our focus is on the existing infrastructure. We do not build. In rare cases, we rehabilitate it, but our focus is primarily on rehabilitation of existing water supply systems so that then we can extend their lifetime, their performance. Currently, we work with about 100 hand pump communities and about 25 borehole systems. Of course, these come in and out depending on a number of dynamics. So at any given time, we have active clients and inactive clients, so we treat them as clients. And our value proposition to these communities is that we take care of the mechanical repairs, so the community doesn't have to think about where the spare parts will come from, where the technician will come from, where the tubes will come from. So we come in to do that, and we commit to repair breakdowns within a period of 3 to 5 days. In fact, for systems like hand pumps, we're able to fix most of the breakdowns within a day. And then for pipe systems, which are much more complicated, as you all know, then we have a bit of time, so 3 to 5 days to make sure that any breakdown is resolved. The implication of that is that we've been so far able to guarantee renewable access to more than 70,000 people in these communities. I think that is a huge achievement from the perspective of health and social benefits to these communities. And that includes students, because we also maintain water points in schools. That includes healthcare facilities. And through the maintenance service, then we see the water points working for much longer than they would typically do if they were under community or the facility management. To be able to achieve that level of performance means we need to set up logistics. It means we need to operate block offices. It means we need to employ technicians. It means we need to stock our spare parts and make sure that we are managing that well, so that the moment we run out of parts, then even before we run out of parts, then we are stocking them. It means you're operating bikes and cars to be able to look for technicians very fast within the areas where you operate. And the other dynamic is that you work in very remote contexts with sparse populations, issues around poorly developed road networks. So if we start to look at the financial side of the service delivery, the cost of actually fixing a breakdown within a day, whether it's a hand pump or pipe system, is significant. And while we collect tariffs from communities, from users, what we realize is that the tariffs do not cover much of the cost of providing that service and providing that service within a day or two. Then we end up with a significant funding gap, and I think that this has been mentioned, that then the rural side becomes a bit attractive for private enterprises like Fundifix that wish to work and provide professional services in these areas. This is more so especially when you start defining the cost of service delivery, because it's not just the parts and the technician, there's also the cost behind running an enterprise like Fundifix. You have overheads and so many other cost elements. and so the way we've been able to survive, or the answer to that challenge that we've had, has been the trust fund. And with the trust fund, we receive performance-based funding that is linked to performance against several indicators. So far, we do annual contracts with the trust fund, and the indicators that the trust fund looks at relates to uptime, which essentially means how many days was water point working out of the total possible time in a year or in a quarter, in whatever period of time. There is further assessment of indicators around volumes of water supply. So we receive payments for supplying volumes of water, so that the incentive there is that then Fundifix has to make sure that the water points are working and working reliably to be able to leverage resources from the trust fund. Otherwise, without that, then we'll not be able to cover operating costs. And then there's also the indicators are also linked to user payments. So user contribution through tariffs. So we collect tariffs directly from the communities that we serve. So our contract, which is tripartite with communities and government, spells out the payments due and the payment frequency. So we collect that directly from the communities. And so our resource-based funding, again, from the trust fund, is linked to us collecting user payments. And that is to maximize tariffs as much as we are relying on resource-based funding to cover cost of service delivery. From operating Fundifix over the last 5 to 6 years now, I think resource-based incentives have sort of given us a different view of service delivery. If we were to look at this from a purely user contribution or user payment for services only, we would have closed shop, I think, long time ago, because then you start with a huge funding gap from day one. Whereas now, if I look at the water point, then I'm seeing the volumes supplied, I'm seeing the tariffs collected from that water point, as well as if I keep it working, then I get additional resources to cover the cost of service delivery. So that changes the game for enterprises like Fundifix that are working in these areas. So currently, in fact, through resource-based funding, we are in fact trying to adapt our services to respond to those incentives. And some of the things that we are doing recently is to look at operator contracts, where we come in and fully manage all the supply systems. We are managing roughly 8 pipe systems through that model. With those systems, we are fully responsible for pump operation, for collection of tariff. We employ the staff. We decide where to allocate resources. So we are fully in charge. But the community still retains their role, so they hold us accountable. This is a tripartite arrangement again with government. So in case of issues, disputes, non-performance, then the community can report us to government, so that then we are held into account. So we are adapting our service to respond to both professionalized maintenance, but also what I would call professionalized management of some of these water supply. We are also investing heavily on monitoring systems and operating systems. That is because if resource-based payment is linked to volumes, to revenues, to repair time, then it means we need to have our data in good order. Otherwise, then we will not be able to report on our performance to the funders. That means then for things like hand pumps, we are operating quite a number of sensors that give us volumes, and we deploy them strategically so that then, let's say for distance hand pumps, we're able to tell when they break down. For institutions, we are able to fix them on time, so we get data on volumes and also functionality, so we are able to respond fast. We also operating things like water ATMs, those ones mostly for revenue collection and also monitoring volumes. With revenue collection, we link them to mobile money. That was a transaction cost significantly, provides a lot of transparency. In case of any disputes with government or even with the trust fund, then we all have access to a common dashboard that Fundifix is not in control of. I'm seeing Anthony the call, so use some of his suspect ATMs, not to promote them. Yeah, but they've been useful in terms of monitoring volumes, payments, and also functionality of the water points. Actually, that provides a very viable mechanism to confirm that Fundifix is performing. More recently, we are starting to focus on water treatment. So without resource-based payment, water treatment is quite an expensive venture. Monitoring alone is very expensive. So if you introduce treatment, then the costs go up. But with alternative funding mechanisms like the trust fund, then we we find a route to sort of make it work. So we are investing now on treatment of drinking water supplies. Thank you. And we can discuss more in the Q&A session.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you very much, Cliff. That's really helpful, and I think that's provided some really important context. I can see there's a lot of questions emerging in the chat box. One of them as we sort of switch to the second panel now, for the trustees maybe to reflect upon, if we have another opportunity to speak a little later, is the constraints for county government, why county government haven't taken up or invested in this model, and what may be the pathways in the future that could be done. So I'll ask the trustees to reflect on that. But now I'd like to introduce our second panel for some discussions. So if they'd like to turn on their videos, we have Iris Braun, who's co-founder and chief officer international of Share, and she'll explain us a little bit more about the company that she works for. We have Amanda Robertson, who's a senior WASH advisor and driving through Nairobi as we speak. So thank you for finding time in your commute, Amanda. And also Simon Wall, who's the general manager external affairs of Base Titanium Limited, which is based down in Kwale. Simon, if I may start with you, Base Titanium was one of the first supporters of the Trust Fund, which we're hugely grateful for. And I'd like, if you could spend a couple of minutes in terms of, not everybody may be familiar with Base, but if you could sort of say a couple of words on what Base is and why you chose to provide some support, and you've continued to provide support over the recent years. Thank you.
Thanks, Rob, and thanks for everyone in the previous session. Very, very interesting stuff. Look, Base Titanium is a mining company. We mine a mineral sands project in Kwale. We are Kenya's first large-scale modern mining project, and we account for 65% of Kenya's mineral output value. Right, so we really dominate the sector. For those of you who are familiar with Kwale, we are on the southern coast of Kenya, and we border Tanzania. It's a historically rather undeveloped part of the country up until devolution that occurred following the 2013 elections. And since then, we've seen a lot of improvement, which more or less coincided with Base's involvement. We took over this project in 2010 and started mining in 2013. So all that sort of timing with devolution and more power to the counties and sort of stuff coincided with our arrival. And look, it's clear that many parts of Kenya and down here in Kwale is no different. Water is critical, and that was true back then, and it's equally true now as we go through what is a considerable dry spell across the country. And it was a perfect fit for us, really. Coming across this sort of project, agreeing to partner with it, because the impacts are so significant, and it had such an obvious, a model and such an interesting sort of objectives to achieve. In that sense, that really fit with how we engage with communities and what we want to see deliver and part of our legacy as well. I think it's interesting to note that mining companies are like, a lot is changing around how mining companies are expected to act. How they're expected to engage with communities and civil society and the like. And anywhere where you can find these partnerships where it brings together, models and expertise like we have here, and the support from an investor in a rural and predominantly underdeveloped region of a country, it's a really neat fit. I think the other really interesting point is that as part of our engagements with communities, mining companies and extractive companies more broadly, they do a lot of sort of social benchmarking, baseline surveying. And I think that data it's a really good way to be able to share that data to design programs like this, and to see how you can have an impact on these communities. So yeah, let me leave it there, except to finally say that obviously any of our programs dealing with community needs that have sustainability built into them, so ingrained, like.
Yeah. Simon, we lost you for a second there. I think you're back. Okay. Maybe, I think Simon had...
Program does is obviously
Okay. Thank you, Simon. We'll come back to you, but that was great. Thank you very much indeed. Iris, if I could invite you to say a couple of words. So you're based in Germany. What on earth are you investing in Kenyan water? Why are you doing this?
Hello, everybody, and thanks, Rob and team, for organizing this event. Really good to have all the people from all these various backgrounds coming together. Indeed, we're here in Berlin, in Germany, and I'm one of the founders of Share. What we do is it's a social enterprise, so similar to Fundifix, but also very different in that we're operating in the retail space. And we're based around the topic, and this is why we were founded. That's why we founded this company. We're based around the topic of resource inequality, social inequality, on basic needs. And of course, water is certainly one of them. And we wanted to link this up very closely to make it very easy for people to help. We wanted to link it very closely to everyday behaviors, like going shopping for food or for beverages in supermarkets and other points of sales. What people do every day. And so what we decided to do is, as the name Share also indicates, is that with every share purchase, you basically share, you donate an equivalent product or service to a person who might not have that access that you have as a consumer at that moment in time. And so for us, we are also in ourselves essentially as a results-based enterprise, because our very claim for consumers is that they will understand what can their personal impact be today through the purchase of goods in the supermarket. And this is really what sets us apart as a company from other companies that do charitable giving, in the sense that people really understand what's their impact. It's clearly written on the packages, and of course it puts the burden on us as a company to also deliver towards that. Now, Fundifix, I discovered in an article in The Economist, I believe, back in 2017, this must have been, and I thought this is just an absolute wonderful fit, because, of course, we as a company, we're not implementing the charitable projects ourselves, but we're working with experienced partners. And what better fit could there be than having somebody who is also focused towards delivering those results, and we can have a very open, transparent partnership around what it is that we can achieve with the funds that we're giving from the proceeds of the products that we sell. So for us, it was really clear that this would be just the perfect partnership. And we do see it makes a difference. So what happened next is I think we started working together now. Correct me here if I'm wrong. I think this must have been 2018, 2019. Since then, you've become one of our main partners for the water projects, which is just wonderful. And Share has grown in the same way. So really, we can see that this results-based promise to consumers is exactly also what is working for individual and private consumers and enterprises around the globe, certainly here in Germany and in Europe. Together with you, we sold around 14 million beverage products that donate to Fundifix and their work. Around 280 million liters of water that has been provided or is in the process of being provided. And so this has really been growing into something fantastic. Also for us as a business, we've just been voted the best startup brand in Germany. So this was just recently, and I think it just goes to show that this results-based promise really works, and it changes something as compared to just saying, well, you give some money for some cause, but really understanding what's happening with that is making a lot of difference. Yes, and if I look into the future, I'd love to, of course, do even more work like that, to be very clear and very concise with what people are getting. As Joy also said, companies are looking for a return on investment. Consumers are looking, in a way, also for a return on their money invested. And this is working just wonderfully here. So if we can get an even closer link on the results, I know you have some innovations also in the pipeline that can do. The pumps can communicate. We can communicate to that. I would love to see this come into reality. and certainly talk much more about this, to also disperse, I would say, one of the prime concerns that charitable work always has, which is, how much does really reach the efforts that we're putting in, and how long lasting is it? So both of these things are wonderfully addressed, and I think this is what we're seeing there in the numbers and in the results. So thanks a lot for this cooperation and what we've achieved together.
Well, likewise, many thanks to you, Iris, and the team, Yvonne, and all the team that you work with. We much appreciate the partnership, and we've learned a lot through that collaboration over many years. Okay, so if we can move to Amanda, who's very patiently waited for us. Amanda, you're Senior Wash Advisor for Kenya and East Africa. One of the questions I wanted to put to you, but I'm interested in your wider observations, of course, is obviously USAID has put out a new global strategy commitment to providing 22 million people with safe drinking water over the next 5 years. Do you see a role of results-based funding in some of that work in the sort of regional or the global context?
Sure, thanks, Rob. And thanks for bearing with me while I'm in the car. For those familiar with Nairobi rush hour traffic, you know that I have plenty of time to dedicate to you. So happy to be here today as a long time just supporter and an enthusiast for Fundifix here in Kenya and preventative maintenance overall, as well as results-based financing. So as Rob said, we did, as the US government, launch a new global strategy in October. Within that, USAID has its own kind of agency-specific strategy that's more contextualized to the development context that we're working in. Within that, Kenya is listed as one of the high priority countries. And so certainly we are very excited here that water, sanitation, and hygiene will continue to be a priority, both in terms of Kenya as well as the agency as a whole. While this is a new strategy, it is the second in kind of this series. And so it's not so much a new one or new content as much as a reworking. And it does focus on, a water secure world with all of the kind of intersectional things that you would expect around health and prosperity and resilience and climate change and things like that. And so I think, the main things that are different about it from our last strategy is that it does have a large focus on equity, which is obviously very relevant to this conversation around climate resilience, both in terms of adaptation and limiting emissions. And then again, the conflict and fragility angle, which is often very relevant when we're talking about, rural and small water schemes. Also, as Rob mentioned, the strategy includes the ambitious goal of 22 million people with access to new or improved water over the course of the next 5 years, and an equal number with sanitation, as well as $1 billion mobilized for WASH. And so I think, in order to achieve these goals, we have to be thinking creatively. And so I'm going to kind of think about this both in terms of the results-based financing or results-based funding, as well as the preventative maintenance side. And I think in terms of the results-based financing, this is something that I think, as a large government agency, we very rarely could be accused of being nimble or agile. But I do think, we are moving steadily towards this type of funding. I think, we've seen in recent years much more of an objectives-based approach to implementation, where it's less of us being prescriptive and more about us saying, here's our common goal, or in, in even better circumstances, us sitting down to determine a mutual goal. And then us really asking our partners, how are we going to achieve this? Think creatively. We as an agency have tried to take on or to be much less risk averse, to be willing to take on more risk, to try new things. And I think, in that move toward that progression towards a more focus on, you tell us how to best achieve these objectives, is the natural progression as well towards results-based financing. And this is certainly happening. I mean, we're doing this in Tanzania. I see a lot of it in the energy sector within USAID, to be honest. It's not something that I feel like is quite as prominent within the WASH sector, but that's not to say that it's not something that, is possible or that we're interested in. It's more a matter of how do we make sure that how do we bring those ideas to the table and how do we structure it accordingly? I would also say another role that we play as well is not just in the actual financing ourselves or the funding ourselves, although that's always on the table. But there's also the piece of us actually, serving as technical or transaction advisors to help other entities access results-based financing. And we have a lot of examples of this, particularly in the WASH sector and here in Kenya as well, where we're actually working with local entities to structure themselves, to put together performance improvement plans, to put together proposals that then culminates in them, that entity accessing financing. So that's another way that we kind of engage in that space. In terms of the preventative maintenance side of things, this is an area that, within the WASH sector, we are extremely interested and supportive of, including the work here of Fundifix in Kenya. I think, we, through our Sustainable WASH Systems project, funded research around just the efficacy of preventative maintenance and saw the drastic improvements in the East Africa region in this space when you brought preventative maintenance into the work. I think, particularly here in Kenya, we often see in our arid and semi-arid lands failure rates of above 60% within 5 years, and of rural community managed schemes. And so looking for ways to address that, particularly in the face of, epic droughts like the one we're undergoing now, is of critical importance. And I think, again, the work that Fundifix and other structures are undertaking to really address that preventative maintenance have certainly gone a long way in showing that, this can be done, and you can see drastic improvements in the uptime and in these aspects of things. So all that to say, I think, if USAID wants to achieve its service delivery goals, like it's stated in the last few months in its new strategy, and support our partner countries in achieving their goals, I think we have to be exploring options such as results-based financing and preventative maintenance. And I'm certainly very hopeful and optimistic that you'll see a lot of this unrolling in our work here in Kenya in the coming months and years. Thanks, Rob.
Amanda, thank you. That was, I have to say, I tip my hat to you as such a professional doing this in a car and a commute in Nairobi. I think very impressive. I'm conscious that we're running close to the hour which we have billed for this. So, I brought everybody back into the room just for some final reflections. There's been a lot of questions posted and we've been monitoring those. One of those that dominates, and this is maybe for the trustees, is the role of county government, their involvement in this process, and what could be done in the future to maybe address this. And one comment, to some degree, the success of results-based funding and corporate funding, does that restrict potentially county government engaging? If we're too successful at this, does that mean that county governments don't engage? But what I'd like to invite everybody, if Albert, Joy, Mike, Cliff and Amanda want to put on their cameras for one final section, is just to go around the table and just have some final reflections on, the future prospects and pitfalls of results-based funding, how we can move forward. And maybe if I start with the trustees, Mike, I can see your camera's on, so maybe if you want some final reflections, please.
I think around the county governments, my own feeling is that the county governments will, increasingly come under pressure to make sure that there is, water services, good quality water services being delivered in these more underserved areas. It's an area that is attracting attention, and so questions are being fired at the county government as to really what they're doing in that space. And I think there is broader recognition that the traditional community-based management model is weak, and so I think we'll see, as the conversation develops with other counties and pressure also from the bottom to get those services, I think the county governments will be looking for alternative models. So I'm not sure that the financing, the trust fund itself, is going to alienate the county governments. I think it provides a very useful example of what can be done in a structured manner. And I hear it from a number of different counties, the sort of ad hoc arrangement of providing subsidies makes it very difficult for them and also for the services that they're trying to support. So I think we'll see county governments coming on board more and more. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Joy, would you like to go next?
Yeah, just 2 points from my side in relation to the same question regarding the county governments. And this is also speaking just from an organization's perspective. So the next wave of operations or the lending coming from the World Bank side and largely into the sector is going to focus very much around performance for results-based financing. So these kinds of models in looking at how do we increase access, but also how do we ensure service delivery. So I find this model, a very innovative way of starting that journey for water service provision in the rural areas. And second point is, again, we are really looking for creative ways for county governments to partner with others, to partner with the private sector, to partner with other stakeholders in the same service delivery initiative. So again, I see this more as an opportunity for the counties to tap into the next wave of how operations, how lending is going to be taking shape in the sector in Kenya, but secondly, as a model to build those partnerships. And so again, just going back to my first point is would really like to have this conversation with the counties and also to hear from their perspective, what is it that is stopping them? And so looking at, or what is it that is holding them back, or what is it within their regulatory frameworks, so within their budgeting frameworks that is constraining them, and how can we support even beyond the Water Maintenance Trust Fund, but as an organization together with partners like USAID, how can we help unlock some of those issues within either the policy environment or the regulatory environment? So this again is not the end of the conversation, but just the beginning of that conversation, and we look forward to interacting with them more in the coming year.
Thank you, Joy. And one of the questions that relates to that, Tara from WaterAid, was asking about the role and the engagement with the county government. So when we set up the trust fund, we had a meeting in the Ministry of Water with the water ministers from the counties to discuss the setup. So they've been involved since day one. And obviously there's been some cycle in terms of staffing, etc. Professor Muma, would you like to say a couple of final comments?
Yes, so thank you, Rob. And I think thank you very much to all of those who have participated. I think the question regarding the role of county governments is an important one. The provision of water services in urban areas and rural areas, it is the mandate of county governments. It is their constitutional mandate, it is their statutory mandate, and therefore, I think I wouldn't see this as an issue of county governments being coaxed and persuaded to come on board. I think it is their mandate. What I think is lacking is an appreciation of the fact that delivery of water services in rural areas through a big county-wide water company is often going to be very costly. And given the constraints in the finances of county governments, is not at all a prudent way to go. It initially looks like, what should be done, but actually it's not the way to go. The cost of it is simply not sustainable. And so what this model shows is that often small standalone systems will in fact be viable if they get some small support in key areas. And the key areas being identified here is maintenance, so that you're able then to ensure that there is reliability of supply over the long term. Now, we think that if county governments can see that in the near to medium term period, a partnership between the county government and private sector, donor organizations, everybody who's got, this issue at the center of their interest, is to create a model where people can join hands, but working within the framework of the fact that this is a statutory mandate of county governments. And so what others are coming to do is to support the county governments to bridge the financing gap. Then I think county governments will step up. That I think would be the idea. So it is really to put forward a policy framework that allows them to play their role with the support of entities like SHARE, entities like Water Sector Trust Fund, that kind of thing. Thank you very much, Rob.
Thank you, Albert. Iris, would you like a few final comments?
Yeah, so I mean, I already said that we're extremely happy about the partnership, and that said, would love to extend it further if at all possible. And I think there's really two things that come to mind. I mean, of course, one is extending the network, and as Amanda also said, there's much more to do, and the goals and ambitions are much larger. And then the second part of it, and I think one sort of is a prerequisite to the other, is to really you know, bridge not just the finance gap, but also communications and create much more content about the work that you're doing, to communicate it, because this is in the end for companies like us and many private funders, it's sort of the currency that we're dealing with, right? To get insights, to get content, to get stories, to get something of the good work that you're doing communicated to people that are interested and that are therefore in a way willing to pay for it, be it through products or to their charitable engagement directly. So in that sense, and with that thought, I'll leave it up to us and the teams to think, you know, how this can be extended. And I fully believe that also working with the county governments would, you know, I think if they see that there is more being talked about what you're doing with Fundifix, with the trust fund, I think the incentives, no, you know, if you look at it in a positive way, the incentives in a more negative way, the pressure to act on these issues is always going to go up, because in the end, governments are responding only to, you know, to the demands or pressures from citizens and the public. So I hope that this can really create a format where everybody wins if we build on the extension of the network and the communication of the work that you're doing.
Thank you very much, Iris. And the note on comms is heard loud and clear. I think we have been operating in stealth mode. So we now have a public website, we have more materials, and we will try and support that a little bit further forward. Thank you. Amanda, are there any final reflections from you? I'm not sure if her signal's so good. Okay, maybe we pass over. I'm conscious we're on time. Cliff, as always, can we leave some final words to you before we wrap up the session?
Yeah, thanks for that, Rob. Yeah, so I think there is an opportunity to scale this, and the trust fund approach provides a model for governments to deliver a reliable service to their constituents. They are ultimately responsible, and in fact, what we do is largely a role for the government. Governments have budgets, as you all know. So every year, county governments allocate significant resources towards repair and maintenance of facilities. The challenge is that this is mostly input-based, not linked to deliverables, to performance. And I think there's an opportunity to adopt this model. I don't think there's anything limiting county governments to take on this and run with it. In fact, from a Fundifix point of view, we'll be looking in terms of future scale up for a government that's willing to run with this, because this is what allows alignment of incentives between ourselves, communities, and them as government. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Cliff. So, I mean, I will wrap up here just to thank everybody who's joined us today. As we've sort of said in the chat box, we'll post the recording of this meeting and we'll try and answer those questions that we've not got around to because of time limits. A final word of thanks to all our partners who've been involved in this work in different dimensions over many years, and to point you to Kitui Water Fund. So to Iris's comment, there is now more communications around this work, and we will endeavour to do more in the future. So thanks to everybody for joining us today, and I think we'll draw it to a close here. So I wish you all a very good rest of your day. Thank you very much indeed.